So we're still working on the Bulldozer. We're going to finish assembling the tractor, and we're going to do some more. You guys can see this. We're going to finish assembling the tractor. We're going to fix the engine in permanently. We're going to put the rest of the cockpit in and the controls, and then do some additional weathering to the tractor itself. The blade, while the front, I love this front. This is excellent. For me anyway, I like it. I may do a little more touch up here and there, but once I get it on the Bulldozer altogether. But we're going to finish the tractor, and this one left the factory green. It didn't leave the factory yellow, so we got to make sure there's no yellow on it, because there was no yellow on it when it left the factory. So yeah, and okay, let's do that. A quick backstory. Back in the second half of the 80s decade, I went through basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky. In the barracks we were in, there was a motor pool right next door, and in that motor pool, there was this green Bulldozer. It was the only one there, and we ran and marched by it every day. One afternoon, a handful of us were assigned to police or pick up trash in that very same lot, and I took the opportunity to get up close to and climb up on this thing and just get a good close look at it. You could tell this thing had seen better days, and it had been sitting there for a while. Given all the dents, dings, and rust on this thing, you wouldn't have any trouble imagining all the young soldiers that had climbed up on this thing for the first time to learn how to operate it. And it was those kids I had in mind while I was working on it. I ended up using a lot of super glue in the final assembly of this thing, but it actually was a lot faster, and I was able to keep the frosting or that fogging effect to a minimum by precisely applying the accelerator using that little dropper bottle. The instructions weren't super clear as to exactly where everything went on the controls, so I went to my reference photos, but it's like it's weird. Every model had a different setup. There was the basics, but there was variations across the board on every one I looked at. So if you've actually operated one of these things, you're probably going to notice that some things aren't exactly where they belong. The more models I build and the more I get into this hobby, I've definitely noticed a style emerging where fidelity is important to the model, but I think it's more important to tell a story than it is to make something that's 100% accurate to the thing that you're modeling. I mean, part of the story of this little guy, it's not just the soldiers that climbed up on it. It's also where they were using it. I mean, Kentucky, the dirt in Kentucky has a heavy clay content and a lot of limestone. So you got to imagine as it's pushing the dirt around, if it's making a berm, which is a mound of dirt, the dirt is going to pile up more. It's going to ride higher on the machinery and the tracks and the blade, versus say like Fort Bragg in North Carolina, where it's really sandy soil. So when you're pushing dirt around down and closer to the coast, the sand is not going to pile up as high, so it's not going to ride up on the machinery, and you're not going to get as much wear on the bottom of it as you would, say, like you would in Kentucky. Trying to imagine the story of that Bulldozer back at Fort Knox has been a lot of fun. I mean, beyond the everyday usage and wear patterns I'm trying to recreate, I'm also imagining its military life as well. So I had to make some assumptions about how it had been used up to the point when we had our encounter. I imagine its primary use was for training, mostly because at that point in history, there hadn't been a major deployment of an armor unit since, Vietnam, and I'm pretty sure this was manufactured after that. So part of training for military operations is not just how to check the oil and push dirt from A to B. Soldiers also need to know how to load this thing for transportation, whether that be on a heavy equipment trailer, also known as a lowboy, or on a rail car. Also, it's not just going to be a bulldozer. There's going to be generators and other support vehicles that would be the standard complement of an engineering unit. So I imagine this is going to create a lot of opportunities for equipment like chains and cables and straps to come in contact with paint. Here, I got my little rotary tool out and cleared some paint to attach the rest of the control levers. This was not going as I had hoped. I wasn't able to hold the part steady enough in order to get the accelerator on the glue and the part at the same time. So after a couple of failed attempts at this, I decided the best thing to do was just to remove the column completely so that I had more control over the parts and where they went. Yeah, I'm still trying to find that balance between how much to assemble before you paint versus how much to paint before you assemble it. In this case, I think I obviously needed to assemble this before I painted it, but once I got everything put back together, I thought it looked pretty good. That's a little better. It's still ugly, but we'll fix it. Alright. I think I want to do I want to glue it back on there and then repaint it? Or do I want to repaint it and then glue it back on there? I think I want to repaint it and then glue it back. No. Yes. 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 A little touch up. The finely detailed weathering has probably been the most enjoyable part of this model for me. Trying to imagine what the wear patterns would be from what was likely many years of service has been a lot of fun. Reference photos have been a great help though. I highly recommend if you're doing anything like this, you need to get some reference material and have it printed out and in front of you while you're working. When I started, I imagined most of the paint being gone from the blade on both the front and the back, but as I studied the reference photos, I realized I need to go back and adjust and add a fair amount of paint back to the model in order to match the wear patterns on the tractor to the wear patterns on the blade. I mean, this blade was used to push a lot of dirt around, and in both directions, but mostly forward, so the heavier wear should be on the front, not on the back. Some of you may be asking yourself, where's the dirt and grime? Aren't bulldozers supposed to be covered in dirt and dust? Well, I can tell you, as a military vehicle, this thing was routinely pressure washed to within an inch of its life, and in fact, any respectable first sergeant would never let this thing in a motor pool while it was covered in dirt. You don't want that glue to get out of there and set up in the wrong place. We'll just keep it moving for a minute. Okay, so I'm calling this one done. Blade works. The tracks work a little bit. All in all, this was an enjoyable project. I really had fun. So this is a little bit at the end here for future me. I'm always wanting to do things better, and I have found that up close video of your work will pull out the flaws so you can find them for later or fix them now. In this instance, the streaking in some places is not really to scale, I don't think. I think it should be thinner, and you can tell, getting close here, focus. That's a big streak for such a small dot of rust. That looks pretty good. I like that. The foot, the deck would have liked. I would have done that if I had it to do over again. I would do that differently. The tracks are brand new, and they look brand new. In the reference photos, these would all be rounded over, so there'd be no sharp edges. And I would imagine probably within the first couple of weeks of this thing going into service, that those tracks would have been worn fairly quickly. So yeah, again, some streaking that's not quite to scale, and there are a number of places where the rust looks like paint instead of rust, so I need to work on that technique. I was really happy with the model. I was really happy with the engine. Had a lot of fun with that. Now those streaks turned out better. Lord, I think my lens is dirty. Is that what that is?